from Andrie Designs. Welcome to the comprehensive video class for the Classic Carryall Handbag and Tote. So this is one of the patterns in the Classic collection, which is a collection of patterns designed to be quick and easy to construct, yet still have that wow factor and still look impressive and complicated to the unknowing eye. So there are two sizes in this pattern. This is the handbag size, and there is also a tote bag size, which is slightly larger. Both bags have the same features and the same components to them, so throughout the pattern I'm going to show you how to assemble each and every component of this handbag size, which even if you're making the tote bag size, the process will be exactly the same. And for some of the trickier parts, I'm also going to show you how to stitch it on the machine as well. So the essential elements of the Classic Carryall are as follows. She has two removable handles which are held on with swivel hooks to D-rings and handle connectors, which are part of the feature of the bag as well. On the front outer panel, she has a beautiful contrast panel down the center. So you're essentially piecing three pieces of fabric together, and that means you can create so many different effects. You can really highlight a certain fabric, or you might want to mute something out and highlight the sides, for example, instead of the contrast down the center. Along the top, she has a main zipper opening, which is using a long pull or a chunky or number 5 zipper, and that opens up into a generous body of the bag. On the inside, she has an inner zipper pocket, and that is what we turn the bag through at the end. So at least for your first one, I highly recommend including that pocket so you can see how it all works. On the outside of the bag at the back, there is a second zipper pocket, and this is a vertical pocket. Again, this is a generously sized pocket, and it's just really good for keeping things you like to access quickly, such as your phone or your keys, etc. So that's on the back, and you can choose which side to put that on when we come to that part of the pattern. Also with the pattern, you'll see that she has a beautiful contrast along the bottom, just to really highlight a favorite fabric or a certain print. In this sample, I've used a luscious red cork for the contrast of the bag, and it really just helps pop the red out of the fabric and go really nicely with the main zipper as well. Finally, an optional extra for the bag is to include bag feet along the bottom. So for the handbag size, you include 4 feet. If you're making the tote bag size, you include 5. So I go through and explain how to install those as well. And essentially that is all the components of the Classic Carryall. So I'm going to step you through how to assemble these parts and how to sew some of them on the machine as well. As always, if you have any questions or are unsure about anything, please don't hesitate to contact me through the contact page of my website, or alternatively you can post in our patterns group on Facebook, and I'll pop a link to both of those in the description below. So from here, pause the video, collect up your fabric, your notions, your hardware, and everything you need to create a Classic Carryall as per the pattern directions. And once you've collected everything up, pop back here and we'll get started. So to make a Classic Carryall, you're going to need the following. You're going to need fabric for your outer, your contrast, your lining, your handles, and your zipper pockets. And for this sample, I'm actually going to use a beautiful red cork for the contrast along the bottom. You're going to need interfacing and a fusible fleece, or in my sample, a based-in foam or sew-in foam, and I'm going to be using this black foam here. You can optionally choose to include or insert, some plastic into the base of the bag just before we finish it at the end, which just gives it a little bit more solidness and stability. So if you want to do that, make sure you've got some plastic on hand as well. You're going to need a long pull zipper for the main closure of your bag, 2 dress zippers for the zipper pockets, 4 swivel hooks, 4 D-rings, some bag feet and stabilizer depending on the size you're making. I'm making the handbag size, so I have 4 bag feet. If you're making the tote bag, you'll need 5. Make sure you grab a label out if you include labels in your bags. And for this design, I also recommend some sewing glue or tape, which just makes installing the zips and other areas of this pattern a lot easier to do. So once you've collected up all your fabric and your notions, pause the video, head off to your cutting table and cut out all your pieces and fuse your interfacing as per the pattern directions. And when you're ready to get started, pop back here and we will begin. To create your handle connectors, first take one of your handle connector pieces of fabric and you're going to place it right side down on your work surface. You're going to fold it in half, matching long sides, and you're just going to give it a press down the center to create a nice crease. From there, we're going to open our connector out and we're going to fold each of those long sides into the center and then give it a press again. When you fold the sides into the center, I like to fold it in and then back over in half and really use my fingers to tuck that raw edge down into that first fold so it's really tidy and gives a nice exact measurement all the way along to fit the hardware for the size you're making. And once you've pressed that first side, just flip it over, fold that remaining long edge out, fold it over into the center. Again, refold it and really tuck that edge down into that center fold. And when you're happy with it, give it a good press to set that fold. Once you're happy with the connector, just open it all the way out. Take a corresponding piece of interfacing, which will be half the width of your connector, and place it down the center 2 rows of that channel. So make sure you have your fusible side to the wrong side of your fabric and just lay it down the center there as best you can. What I find is easiest in terms of getting it aligned exactly with the fabric and the folds we've just made is to actually refold the connector all the way back up and then fuse the interfacing in place. So I'm going to fold my long sides back into the center and I'm going to fold my connector in half again, matching those folded edges on the outside just like they were before. Feeling to make sure the interfacing is sitting nice and flat along both sides, and once you're happy with where the interfacing is sitting, give it a really good press to fuse that interfacing in place. So once you're happy with how your interfacing has been fused, you're going to pause the video, head to your machine, and you're going to top stitch to close off your connector down both long sides using a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and a top stitch length of about 3 to 3.5 millimeters. Make sure those 2 folded edges stay nice and parallel together, not overlapping either in the front or the back. And once you've top stitched that first connector, pop back here and we will continue. Once you've top stitched down both long sides of your first handle connector, you're going to place it right side down on your pressing table. So you may notice with the stitching that there's a side that looks better than the other. I typically like to have the side that I've had face up when I've stitched it as my right side. And so that's my top thread, and then I call the side that has the bobbin thread my wrong side. So placing it right side down, we're simply going to fold one short edge over 2 inches and give that fold a press. If you have directional fabric, you'll need to make sure that you're folding from the top edge down and not the bottom edge up. So folding it over 2 inches and just give it a measure to make sure it is 2 inches, no more and no less. Matching up those folded edges on the sides, and when you're happy with it, give that fold a little press to set it. So from here, we're going to slot one of our D-rings into that fold, so the nice bottom flat edge is going to sit nicely in that fold. And we're not going to stitch the whole of the connector just yet, but to hold that flap down ready to stitch across the bottom of the bar, I'm just going to place a little bit of glue. You could use tape, or you could also just pin it in place if you wanted as well. However, I find glue is just quick and easy. So I'm just placing a little bit of glue there, refolding my connector, matching up those nice folded edges down both sides, press it down, and I'm going to give it a little bit of heat just to set the glue to make things faster. So that's our first handle connector. So from here, come with me, we're going to head to the machine and I'm going to show you how to stitch under the straight bar of your D-ring to lock that hardware in place. So to stitch our D-ring in place, you're going to need the zipper foot on your machine. Make sure your needle is set to the needle down position, and again you have a top stitching length set of about 3 to 3.5 millimeters. I like to stitch with my hardware on the right, so I've made sure my needle is on the right of my zipper foot as well. What we're going to do is we're going to stitch hard up under the bottom bar of that D-ring to lock it in place so it doesn't move once the bag is assembled. To do that, I like to start in the center of my connector. I'm just going to lower the foot and make sure it's really hard up under the bar and the fabric is under the foot as far to the left as possible. I'm going to make one stitch forwards and back to lock my threads in, and then I'm going to stitch all the way to this closest edge of the connector first. Again, making sure my needle is right up under the bar of the D-ring. When I get there, I'm going to lock reverse in and I'm going to stitch all the way back to the far side of the connector. Again, making sure the needle and the foot is right up under that D-ring, and with the edge of the connector or the end, I'm almost kind of pulling it out to the left to make sure that it is right up underneath that D-ring. When I get to that far side, I'm going to take reverse off. I'm going to stitch back to the center to where I started, and I'm just going to make 2 to 3 stitches to lock in my stitching. From there, we can take our connector out and trim off our threads. And that's our first D-ring installed on our first handle connector. So once you've done that, trim off your threads and come with me and pop back to your workstation and we will continue. So from here, your first handle connector should be looking something like this. So next we're going to pop this to the side and you're going to pause the video and then repeat that process to create your 3 remaining handle connectors and install your 3 remaining D-rings. And once you've done all that, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've created all 4 handle connectors, they should be looking something like this with all your 4 D-rings nicely installed in them. So for now, we're going to put those to the side and we're going to move on to creating our handles. So to create your handles, first we're going to take one of our handle pieces which already has interfacing fused to the wrong side of it. We're going to place it right side down on our pressing table, and just like we did for the connectors, we're going to first start by folding it in half, matching long raw edges together, wrong sides together, and give it a really good press down the center to create a nice crisp fold. So from here we're going to open it out and we're going to fold each long edge into that center fold. Again, I like to fold it over and then over in half again to really push that raw edge into that center fold and give it a really good press along this first side to set that seam. From here, we're simply going to flip our handle over and repeat to fold the remaining long edge into the center and give it a really good press to set that last fold. So once your strap or your handle, is folded just like this, all we're going to do is simply open it out, and working on one short end at a time, we're going to fold it over 1/4 of an inch and give it a press. I just eyeball it, however you can measure this distance if you would like. And I start by pressing the first 2 center channels first at that 1/4 inch. And then from there, what I like to do on the outer 2 channels is actually just taper it in ever so slightly. It's barely more than maybe 1/16 of an inch more than the 1/4 inch we've just made. And that just helps curve the edges so that when we refold the strap, these sit down, tucked down nice and hidden almost, and it gives a really tidy finish at the end of the strap or the handle. So I'm just curving that ever so slightly down on those outer edges and pressing those. And while that end is cooling down, I'm going to take the other short end and I'm going to repeat to press this end in 1/4 inch and curve the edges of the sides as well. So now once that end is cooling down, I'm going to go back to the first short end and we're simply going to refold it back up and give it a good press. To do that, we're going to fold over our 1/4 inch and just use your nail to really push that fabric into those outer folds so that it creases nicely and tidily. And then once you're happy with those two folds, refold your strap back so it is down to its original width, ready for the hardware, and give that short end a really good press to help tell everything where to go. Repeat that for the last short end of this handle. And that's our first handle pressed and ready to stitch. So from here, pause the video, head over to your machine. You're going to stitch around all 4 sides of your handle using a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and a top stitch length of about 3 to 3.5 millimeters. Pop back here when you're ready to continue. So once you've top stitched around the edges of your first handle, it should be looking something like this. So from here, we're just going to place it right side down, and again, that's if you have certain fabric that you've cut or your stitching is better on one side, then that'll be the right side. So I'm just going to turn mine over, and at each short end, similar to what we did when we installed the D-rings and our connectors, we're going to install a swivel hook at each end. So we're going to simply fold one finished short end over 1.5 inches and give it a bit of a press to create a fold. So I'm just going to measure that first. Oops, I need to come a bit more. Just like that. And I'm just going to give it a little press just to create that fold. And then from here, I'm simply going to slot a swivel hook up into the fold of the handle. I'm just going to use a little bit of glue to hold that flap down prior to stitching. Make sure your folded edges are nicely aligned with each other, just like that. And I'm just going to set the glue so it dries faster with my iron. And that is ready to stitch. So from here, just like when we installed the D-rings on our connectors, you're going to pause the video and head to your machine. Make sure you have your zipper foot installed, and you're going to stitch 2 rows. The first row you're going to stitch hard up under the swivel hook in exactly the same manner as we did for the handle connectors. The second row you're going to stitch directly over top of the top stitching we literally just made at the end of our handle. So 2 rows under the swivel hook and along that top stitching row at the edge of the handle. Once you've stitched that, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've stitched your first swivel hook in place, it should be looking something like this. There's a row of stitching directly under the swivel hook itself, and there's also a row of stitching across that existing 1/8 top stitching at the short end of the handle. So from here, all you need to do is pause the video and attach your remaining swivel hook from that pair to the other short end of the handle, making sure that you are folding the fabric over to the same side as you did for this first end. And then once you've done that, put that completed handle to the side and repeat this whole process to create your second handle using your remaining 2 swivel hooks. Once you've done that, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've created your second handle, your pair of handles should be looking something like this. So your handles are now complete. We can pop those to the side along with our handle connectors, and we're going to move on to creating your outer panels. So to create your outer front panel, first begin by taking your pieces A, B and C and just lying them out on your work surface like I have. It helps to put them in order, and if you have directional fabric, make sure you're orientated, or they are orientated correctly, with the top being at the top. This fabric, although it is a little bit undirectional, when I fused my interfacing, I did mark the top of the fabric pieces just so that I do make sure I get it around the correct way. So I've done that for my A and C pieces, and for B, this is just a piece of vinyl, so it doesn't have a direction, so I've just placed it in the middle. So from here, we're going to start by placing B over onto A, and we're going to join them together. So taking B, which is your center panel or your feature panel, literally just flip it over and onto A so they are right sides together. Match up this pair of long raw edges, and because I'm using vinyl, I'm just going to clip mine together. However, you can use pins if you just have normal fabric. So just place a couple along that edge to hold them in place, just like that. And from here, you're going to pause the video, head to your machine. You're going to stitch down this side using a 1/2 inch seam allowance to attach these two panels together. A normal stitch length of about 2 to 2.5 millimeters. Make sure you reinforce at the start and finish, and pop back here when you're ready to continue. So once you've joined A and B together, it should be looking something like this. So from here, just take your rotary cutter or your scissors, and we're just going to trim that seam allowance down to 1/4 inch just to tidy things up a little bit. So from here, pause the video, head to your pressing station. We're going to fold B out, and we're going to press A away from B, making sure that the seam allowance joining the two faces towards A. So give it a nice good press to really flatten that seam out, making sure that seam allowance is under A, towards A, and when you're ready to continue, pop back here. So once you've given that seam a good press, you're going to head over to your machine and you're going to top stitch down that seam to help everything sit nice and flat. You're going to top stitch with a 1/8 inch seam allowance and a stitch length of about 3 to 3.5 millimeters. Make sure to reinforce at the start and finish, and once you've top stitched down the seam, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've top stitched down that seam joining A to B, it's time to repeat that process to attach C to your AB panel. So laying your pieces back out as they are going to be when your bag is finished, we're literally just going to flip C over so it is right sides together with B, and we're going to join them down the remaining long edge of B. So first up, matching up those raw edges and just clip them together. Just like that. From here, pause the video, head to your machine and stitch to attach using a 1/2 inch seam allowance and a normal stitch length of about 2 to 2.5 millimeters. Pop back here when you're ready to continue. So from here, we're going to trim that seam down to 1/4 inch, just like we did when we joined A to B. And then from here, we're going to fold C out, and again, we're going to make sure that the seam allowance joining these two panels points out towards C and away from our center contrast here. So from here, pause the video, head to your pressing station and give the seam a really good press to flatten that seam out as best as you can, and then head to your machine and top stitch using a 1/8 inch seam allowance and a top stitch length of about 3 to 3.5 millimeters. Once you've finished off this seam, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've top stitched down the seam joining B and C together, your outer front panel should be looking something like this. So from here, all we're going to do is simply fold and find and mark the center top and center bottom of our outer front panel and our outer back panel. So we're going to go ahead and do that now. And then from here, if you are someone that likes to include labels on your bags, feel free to pause the video and you're going to install your label on your outer back panel. Make sure it is centered horizontally and that you place it 1 inch down from the top raw edge of that outer back panel. Once you've done that, pop back here and we will continue. So now that our outer front and our outer back panels are assembled and prepared, ready for the next step, it's time to move on to attach our handle connectors to our outer panels. I'm going to tape mine in place, however you can glue or pin them in place if you like. They're going to be stitched later once the fleece or foam is attached to the back of the outer panels. So we're just essentially tacking them in place for now. To align them, if you're making the handbag size, you're going to place each connector on the outer front 2.5 inches out from either side of those center marks we made earlier, and you're going to place the top fold of the fabric, not the top of the D-ring, you're going to place that edge 2.5 inches down. If you're making the tote bag size, you're going to place the inner edge of your connector 3.5 inches out and 2.5 inches down. So before we align the connectors, what I like to do just on the wrong side of them is actually just place a couple of lengths of tape, which is what is going to hold them in place prior to stitching. We have a few steps to do before they get stitched, so it is best if you can, if you have a good adhesive, to tape or glue them in place well first at this point so that they don't come adrift later on and cause havoc for you when you're trying to create or complete the other steps prior to stitching them. So that's my 2 connectors prepped, so I'm just going to take the paper off the first one and I'm going to get my ruler ready to line it up. So what I like to do is line up my outer front panel with the lines on my cutting mat so I can make sure everything is nice and square. So I'm going to line up the center mark with this line here. Check that the center bottom is down also with that same line and that the top is nice and level with that horizontal line on my mat. I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to place it on top. So because I'm making the handbag size, I'm going to make sure I measure out 2.5 inches out from that center mark. So I'm going to place my ruler here. I actually might, oh dear, let's line that up again. I'm actually going to turn it over. I'm going to work this way. So I've got 2.5 inches out and I'm going to check down the bottom that it also is 2.5 with the lines on my cutting mat. And then I'm going to make sure horizontally that the lines of the ruler are level across the bottom. So I know that this edge is nice and square with both the fabric and the cutting mat. And then I'm going to place the folded edge of the fabric 2.5 inches down from the top edge of that panel. So I'm going to just fold the D-ring back, look, and there's 2.5. That goes there. I'm going to make sure the edge of this connector is right up against the edge of the ruler. And when I'm happy with its placement, I'm going to stick it in place. Just like that. So if, like me, your connector is slightly shorter than your outer panel, don't worry at all. It does not matter if it is slightly shorter or even if it is slightly longer. If it is more than 1/2 inch, you'll need to recheck your measurements for the cut length of your connector and your placement and your fold length. It shouldn't be more than that. If anything, it should be no more than about 1/8 to about not quite 1/4 inch. If anything, that is fine. There is a 1/2 inch allowance across the bottom here, so that will be easily caught in that seam, and it just allows for different thicknesses of fabrics in this fold here. So once you're happy with the placement of that first connector, we're going to go ahead and place the second connector on. So again, prepare the back. In my case, try and get the paper off the tape. There we go. So I'm going to line up my ruler with my cutting mat, making sure the top is square, the center marks are square. That looks nice. So I'm going to flip my ruler over, and again, because I'm doing handbag, I'm doing 2.5 inches out, and I'm going to square up my ruler with my mat. And then, so that's 1, 2.5, and I'm going to come down 2.5 inches as well. So 1, 2.5 to the top edge of my fabric, the fold. And that's there. I'm going to make sure the edge, the inner edge of my connector is up against the edge of the ruler, and I'm going to stick it down. And I'm also going to eyeball this particular connector to make sure that these gaps are nice and parallel and equal. And that looks really good from where I'm standing, so I'm quite happy with that. Another way you can cross-check that your connectors are the correct measurements out from each other is actually to fold your panel in half, match out these outer side edges together. And then if you lift the bottom up, your 2 connectors should be coming out on top of each other. If one is slightly to one side or the other, you'll need to remeasure because you want these 2 to be exactly the same distance out from that center mark. So once you're happy with the placement of those 2 connectors, we are going to move on to aligning the 2 remaining connectors onto your outer back panel. So just put your outer front to the side, pause the video, line up your outer back panel, stick your 2 remaining connectors in place, and once you've done that, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've aligned and stuck your 2 remaining handle connectors to your outer back panel, your outer back should be looking something like this. So we're just going to place that panel to the side just for now. We're going to go back to our outer front, which has our connectors already attached, just stuck in place, with tape or glue. And we're going to take one of our contrast panels, and for mine I've got this beautiful luscious red cork, and we're going to place it directly underneath our assembled outer front panel, just like this, both right sides up. And then we're going to flip our contrast panel up and onto our outer front, so they're now right sides together. And we're going to match up the bottom raw edge of the outer front panel with that top raw edge of the contrast panel, and we're going to pin or clip in place. So I'm just going to flip mine around so that it's easier for me to do. Just like that. So from here you're going to pause the video, head over to your machine, and you're going to stitch to attach along this bottom edge using a 1/2 inch seam allowance and a normal stitch length of about 2 to 2.5 millimeters. Make sure you reinforce well at the start and finish, and once you've stitched that seam, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've stitched that bottom seam using a 1/2 inch allowance, it should be looking something like this. So from here we can go ahead and trim that seam down to 1/4 inch. So from here, as you can imagine, all that's left to do for this seam is to fold your contrast panel down, and you want to make sure that that seam allowance we just stitched is also pointing down, as you're going to stitch directly on top of your contrast panel. So from here you're going to pause the video, you're going to head to your pressing station, and you're going to give the seam a really good press to help set the seam and help flatten those fabrics out. And if you're like me and you've used cork or something different, you may need to press it from the wrong side so you don't damage those delicate surfaces. And once you've pressed that seam down and you've flattened it out as much as you can, head to your machine and you're going to top stitch on the contrast panel side using a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and a top stitching length of about 3 to 3.5 millimeters. Once you've done that, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've pressed your contrast panel down and you've top stitched along the nice seam that you've created there, your outer front should be looking something like this. So this is as far as we're going to go just for now. So we're going to pop the outer front to the side temporarily, and we're going to repeat those steps to finish assembling our outer back panel. So when you're ready, pause the video. You're going to attach your remaining contrast panel to the bottom edge of your outer back panel. You're going to trim the seam down, press it down, and top stitch to finish. Pause the video, pop off and do that, and head back here when you're ready to continue. So once you've created your outer back panel, you should have two beautiful outer panels looking something like this. So from here it's time to attach the fleece or foam to the wrong sides of these panels to help give the bag some structure. So as you know, I'm going to use foam for my Classic Carryall, and if you're using a fusible foam or a fusible fleece, you can simply place your panel over top and head to your pressing station and give it a good press to fuse it all in place, just as per the manufacturer's directions. However, if like me you're using a sew-in foam or a sew-in fleece, you'll need to place your panel on top of your foam, wrong side of the panel to the foam or fleece, and clip in place and baste around the outside. If you need further help or tips and tricks on how to do this, make sure you check out my free YouTube tutorial called Basting Fabric to Foam, and in that I just go into this process in a lot more depth so that you get a really good attachment of your panels to your fleece or foam prior to moving on to assembling your bag. When we're basting these panels in place in particular for this pattern, normally I recommend a 1/4 inch allowance. However, because of the zipper that we have along the main opening of the bag, for this pattern in particular, I suggest you use a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, especially along the top edge, so that you don't have to remove your basting stitches later. So from here, pause the video, head over to your machine and baste or fuse at your pressing station your panels in place, and pop back here when you're ready to continue. So once you've fused your fleece or basted your foam in place, your two outer panels should be looking something like this. And from here, it's time to install and secure our handle connectors in place. So I'm going to show you how to stitch those on the machine, and prior to heading to the machine, if you've used a sew-in foam or fleece like I have, you'll see that your fabric is separate from the fleece or foam in the center. that is absolutely fine. That's how it's supposed to be. However, prior to stitching the connectors in place, I like to make sure that everything is going to be stitched exactly where I want it, and it's not going to walk or skew out of place as I stitch it. So what I like to do at my workstation first is just take a couple of pins, if you can pin through your fabric, and I just put a couple of pins up the side, across the top and down the bottom around each connector for the ones that I can. Obviously for my grey silver vinyl I won't be able to. Just to help hold it in place so that when I'm stitching I know that my fabric is not moving on top of my foam. So I'm just going to duck a pin in there. I'm probably going to put 2 down each side. And I'm going to put 1 across the top. And then 2 down the other side. And I've put these in the direction that I'm going to be stitching so that I can remove them as I go. So they're only a very temporary hold. Now obviously for this, as I said, I've got vinyl and I can't pin through that. But what I can do, because under this vinyl here you're not going to see it whatsoever because of the connector, I can actually put a couple of pins directly through the connector itself. So that'll just help hold that in place. So once I've pinned that one, I'm also going to prepare and pin my back panel in place, and then I'm going to head to the machine to stitch them. So from here, pause the video. If you like, I suggest you pin around your connectors to secure them to your fleece or foam prior to stitching, and then head over to your machine and I'll see you over there. Okay, so to stitch your handle connectors in place, you're going to need your zipper foot attached at your machine, your needle set to the needle down position, and a top stitch length set of about 3 to 3.5 millimeters. What we're going to do is we're essentially just going to stitch from the bottom left hand corner when your panel is orientated correctly, and we're going to follow that existing row of top stitching up that left hand side all the way to where our D-ring has been attached to the handle connector. From there we're going to drop our needle, we're going to rotate our panel, and we're going to stitch across, back and across, so 3 passes directly under that D-ring, and then we're going to drop our needle again. We're going to stitch down the right hand side following that existing row of top stitching, and then to finish we're going to stitch right across the bottom in the ditch between the connector and the panel and the contrast panel. So to start, we're going to start in that bottom corner. I'm just going to line up my foot, and I'm going to put my foot down, but then I'm also going to manually drop my needle to make sure that I'm right in that corner and right over that top stitching. And then what I like to do, because we're top stitching, is I actually like to duck my threads through to the wrong side and tie them off. So because I'm going to do that, all I'm going to do is 1 stitch forward and backward just to lock my threads in, and then I'm just going to push them back. And now I'm just going to work my way slowly up this first side of the connector, making sure that I follow that existing row of top stitching. So as I come up, oh, there goes my pin. As I come up to the D-ring, because of the height change, my foot starts to slow down. It's getting a little bit stuck. So I'm just going to use my height compensation tool, which is also known as a hump jumper. I'm just going to use that to lift the back of the foot so that my foot is level. And that'll make it much easier for the machine to do those last few stitches, so I can stop right in at the existing top stitching basically when the D-ring was installed. So my needle is down, I'm going to lift my foot, I'm going to turn, I'm going to drop my foot, and I'm going to come all the way across the top of the connector underneath that D-ring. From here I'm going to lock reverse in, and I'm going to go all the way back across. And take reverse off and come all the way back to this front edge, and I'm going to stop right where that side row of top stitching is. Leave my needle down, lift my foot, I'm going to take that pin out, I'm going to rotate my panel, drop my foot, and I'm actually going to put my tool under the front of my foot now just as I ease my way down off the D-ring, just to allow for that height change. And I'm going to look in the side to make sure that my stitches are in fact on top of my existing stitching. Just while I'm getting off the hardware, there we go, take that pin out, and then tracking back down that second side on top of the top stitching we made earlier. When we get to the bottom, we're going to drop our needle, we're going to turn the panel, and we're just going to stitch across the bottom right in that ditch where the contrast panel joins back to the starting corner. And just one stitch forward and back to finish off, and then you can lift your needle and take your panel out. So as I said, what I like to do is actually duck my threads through to the wrong side and tie them off with a reef knot just to make it look a bit tidier. So if you'd like to do that now. Otherwise, pause the video, head back to your workstation, and we will continue. So once you've stitched your first handle connector in place, it should be looking something like this. And if you look at the wrong side of your panel, you should have a nice beautiful rectangle with a few reinforcement stitches right up under where the D-ring sits. So that's the first one stitched in place, and from here all that's left to do is stitch the remaining one on that same panel and then the 2 handle connectors on the remaining panel. So pause the video, head off and stitch your 3 remaining handle connectors in place and pop back here when you're ready to continue. So from here, once you've stitched all 4 handle connectors in place, it's time to mark out and fuse the stabilizer in place for the bag feet. Now, bag feet are completely optional, you do not have to include them. However, as you know, in this sample I am going to, so I'm going to show you what to do if you have decided to include them in your sample. So we're just going to work on one panel at a time, and all we're going to do simply is measure and find the placement for those bag feet based on the size you are making. So I'm making the handbag size, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to measure in 2 1/4 inches and up 1 3/4 inches on both bottom corners of my outer front panel, and then I'm going to make a small mark. So working on one side at a time, I'm going to come, what did I say? I'm going to come in 2 1/4 inches and I'm going to come up 1 3/4, which is down here. Right there, and I'm going to make a mark right at that corner. And then all I'm going to do is repeat that for the other bottom corner. So again, I'm going to come in 2 1/4 inches and I'm going to come up 1 3/4. Make sure my ruler is nice and square with the edges of the panel, and I'm going to make a mark in that corner as well. So that's where the 2 bag feet are going to go once my outer bag is assembled. So all that's left to do in preparation for these is what I'm going to do first is actually use the washer, one of the washers that came with my bag feet. I'm going to place it directly over top of that mark, centered horizontally and vertically. So I'm just going to sort of eyeball about there, and I'm just going to draw in those cut lines ready for later. I'm going to do it on the same thing on this side as well, just like that. And then what I'm also going to do is fuse stabilizer to the wrong side of this panel directly underneath these 2 marks, which will provide reinforcement for the bag feet when we go to install them. So to transfer these marks, just to save having to remeasure, all I'm going to do is take a pin, poke it directly through that center dot of the first mark, turn my panel over, and then just using some tailor's chalk or a different type of marker, I'm just going to make a little cross at that mark where the pin has come out. And then I'm going to turn it back over and repeat that for the other mark as well. And then from here it's just a case of fusing stabilizer over top. So to do that, all I do is fold it in half, fusible side out. I eyeball it and look that it's horizontally in line, place it directly over my mark and let it unfold. I also like to make sure that it's kind of, the edges are square with the panel. It doesn't really matter, it's just something tidy that I like to do. Then I'm just going to take a pressing cloth, just because of the foam, I don't want to damage that, setting my iron directly on top of it, and I'm going to fuse my stabilizer in place. just like that. So that's the first piece fused in place. So all I'm going to do is repeat that for the second mark on this same panel. So again, I'm going to put my stabilizer over top, unfold it, make sure it's nice and square, and fuse it in place. So once you've fused both pieces of stabilizer on that same panel, all we can do now is turn it over and I just use a seam ripper. However, some people like to use a tiny pair of snips or a very tiny little rotary cutter to just cut those two slits open that we made with the washer, ready for when we install the bag feet. So we're pretty much doing every single step for installing the bag feet except for actually installing them at this stage. So just placing your fingers underneath so that you don't separate the layers too much, but be careful where your fingers are, of course. I'm just going to dive my seam ripper in at the top of that line, come down slightly and out. And same for the other one, and this one, and that one. So my outer front panel is all prepared. I have my little slits ready for the bag feet later. So all I'm going to do is pop this one to the side. When you're ready, pause the video, go ahead and mark and fuse the stabilizer, and then cut your slits for the bag feet on your outer back panel. And once you've done that, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've marked the placement of your bag feet and you've installed or fused your stabilizer and cut the slits, your two outer panels are essentially complete. If you're making the tote bag size, the placement for your fifth bag foot is directly in the center along the bottom seam once the bag is assembled. So you don't need to do anything for that fifth foot at this stage, and that's why there's no stabilizer, because the seam is actually the reinforcement on its own. So just pop your fifth foot along to the side with your other feet. So from here we're going to put our outer front panel to the side, we're going to use our outer back panel, and we're going to move on to creating your outer zipper pocket. So to create your outer zipper pocket, you're going to need to take one of your outer zipper pocket panels, and first what we're going to do is just fold it in half, right sides together, to create a crease vertically down the center. So just go ahead and do that now, and you just a finger press crease will be fine. However, if you really want, you can press it with the iron, though it's not really needed. Just like that. So that is the center of our pocket panel. So from here, placing your pocket right side down on your work surface, what we're going to do is we're going to take our ruler and we're going to draw a line 1/4 inch out on either side of that fold, just using your tailor's chalk and a ruler or measuring device of some sort. And what I find is best is to mark the center top and center bottom using that fold first. Just helps eyeball and line up your ruler, especially if you have trouble seeing the crease under your ruler. As we work through this zipper pocket, I'm going to work through it at a fairly steady pace. However, if you need more in-depth explanations or want to know more tips and tricks on creating zipper pockets, feel free to pop over to our YouTube channel, where we have a free video called Creating a Zipper Pocket, which goes into a lot more depth and slows this process right down and is free for you to watch if you would like to. And I'll pop a link to that video in the description below. So from now, we're just going to measure 1/4 inch out on either side and just draw a line down almost all the way. It doesn't have to be all the way along. So 1/4 inch out on this side as well, just like that. So there's our 1/2 inch, which is our width of our box or our gap where our zipper is going to be installed. And then from here, what we're going to do is measure down 1 inch from the top curved edge of the pocket, and that will be the top of the box. So just using your ruler or cutting mat just to make sure it's nice and straight. We're just going to draw across the top there. And then we're going to measure down 6 inches, which will be the total length of the box. So I'm just going to turn my panel this way. Going to measure 6 inches and draw a line, which will be the bottom edge of the box. And then, as you know, I like to draw little snipping lines for once the pocket piece is installed. So once you have your box drawn, it's time to place it onto our outer back panel. So this is the panel, remember, that does not have the contrast. And I'm going to put mine on the left-hand side, just like in the pattern itself. However, you can choose which side you would like your pocket to be. It's completely up to you. So I'm going to use the lines on my cutting mat to align my outer back panel, so I know that is nice and square before I go and place my pocket piece on. So just using the center top mark on my panel and squaring up the bottom edge and the side edges with the lines on the cutting mat, making sure everything looks nice and square from where I'm standing. That looks really good. So from here, I'm then going to place my pocket panel onto the outer back panel. So in order to make sure that my pocket piece is in the correct alignment, I'm going to follow the measurements in the pattern directions. So for the handbag size, you need to make sure that the top curved edge of your pocket piece is 3/8 of an inch down from the top raw edge of the panel. So I'm just going to grab my ruler, move that out of the way. I'm just going to place this up here at 3/8. And that is where the top edge of my pocket piece is going to sit, just like that. And for the handbag size, I need to make sure that the center fold that we made earlier is 5.5 inches in from my chosen side edge of my panel. So in my case, it's the left-hand side. So what I'm actually going to do, I think, is turn this around. Where's the D-ring? There. So I'm going to go just under the D-ring because I want it to be quite flat. So my ruler's sitting flat. I'm going to place it directly on the panel, and I can see that 5.5, I just need to come over a little bit at the top, and looking at the bottom, I am almost spot on as well. So the whole panel just needed to come slightly to the left for me. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to cross check that my top is still 3/8 of an inch down. It's possibly moved out a little bit now. Move there. That looks pretty good. So if you're making the tote bag size, you'll need to make sure this top edge of your pocket is 1 inch down from the top and that it is 6.25 inches in from one side. So slightly different measurements there. So once you've got your measurements sorted and you have double checked, because once we've stitched and cut this open, there's no going back. What I also like to do is just eyeball it. So looking at my panel, looking at my pocket, to me it looks like the lines are slightly skewed in that sort of direction. It could be just because I didn't fold it accurately enough in the beginning. So all I'm going to do without moving it vertically, because we don't want to go too close to the top, is I'm just going to tilt it ever so slightly so that in my view the box that I've drawn is nice and parallel to the sides of my panel. It was a minute adjustment, but I'm finicky, you know that, and I like things to be as perfect as possible. Before we pin and stitch, what we must do is check that this box that we're going to be installing the zipper into does not coincide or hit our contrast panel or our connectors. Now with the tote bag size, everything's a bit bigger and you have a lot more clearance. However, with the handbag size like I'm making, this is where you need to be really particular. So just keeping your hand down in the center, you can just fold the side back that's closest to the edge or the edge that you've measured from and check that this edge of the box, so where your fingers are, is not going to hit the connector. And you can also place your thumb at the bottom and lift it up and make sure that there's a little bit of clearance between the bottom edge of the box and your contrast panel. Once you're happy with your placement of your pocket piece, we can go ahead just like we would for any normal zipper pocket and we can pin that panel in place. So once you've pinned your panel in place, pause the video, head over to your machine, and you're going to stitch around your box to attach using a normal stitch length of about 2 to 2.5 millimeters. Once you've done that, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've stitched around the outer edges of your box, it should be looking something like this. So we can go ahead and cut that box open, and if you want to, just like I'm about to, you can just double check before we go cutting through our panel that it clears the connector that's nearest to it, easily clears the other connector, it clears your label if you've included one, and it clears the contrast panel on the bottom. Once you've triple checked and you're happy with all of that, you can go ahead and cut your box open. And then from here, before we turn our pocket through and give it a good press, what I strongly suggest you do is flip your panel over and trim the fleece or foam out of that box to help reduce bulk and make the installation of the zipper a lot easier. So once you've cut the fleece or foam out of your box, it should be looking something like this. So from here, head to your pressing station. You're going to press the edges of your pocket through to the other side. So essentially it's going to be on the inside of the bag. Because we're working with fleece or foam, I suggest you press it in 2 stages. So first halfway through and then all the way around. And I'm going to be gluing my panels down temporarily once they're turned and pressed, just to hold them nice and flat while I install the zipper. I strongly suggest you do that as well, or use tape or something removable, nothing permanent, but it is obviously up to you if you want to do that. So from here, pause the video, head to your pressing table and press your pocket through to the other side. Give it a really good press on both sides to get a nice crisp box. And once you've done that, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've pressed your pocket piece through to the wrong side and given your box a really good press, should be looking something like this. And from here it's time to install our zipper. So as you know, I like to use wash away quilter's tape to install my zipper. However, some people prefer pins or glue. That is absolutely fine. It's just whatever works for you. So go ahead now, pause the video, prepare your box with the tape or glue around the edges, and then go ahead and place your zipper in place as best you can, making sure that the teeth are nice and centered vertically down this gap and that your pull is inside the box and not accidentally left out. So once you're happy with the placement of your zipper and everything's looking nice and horizontal and vertically aligned, it's time to head over and stitch your zipper in place. So remember, using a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance around the outer edges of your box. Remember to stitch 3 times across each short end of your box to really hold the join in over the zipper teeth. And remember, because we're top stitching, we want to use a top stitch length of about 3 millimeters, not quite a full top stitch length because we still need a little bit of strength to hold that zipper in place, and not too many reinforcing stitches at the start and finish. It's much tidier to duck your threads in at the end, knot them off and then hide them to give a really tidy finish. Again, if you want further tips or you want to see how to stitch this in place at the machine, make sure you check out the Creating a Zipper Pocket video on YouTube, where I show all these steps in a lot more detail. So from here, pause the video, head to your machine, stitch around the box to install your zipper, and head back here when you're ready to continue. So once you've stitched your zipper in place, it should be looking something like this. So before we go ahead and install the remaining outer zipper pocket piece to finish off our pocket, just have a look on the inside of the pocket or the wrong side of the back panel, and if you have any tape or glue that's overhanging on the or past the edges of the zipper tape, just gently lift up the edge of the zipper tape. I just run my nail along that gap and just remove that tape or wash that glue away, just to tidy things up and so that there's no sticky residue in the way for the end user of the bag. So from here, we're literally just going to place our remaining zipper pocket piece right sides together, and we're going to stitch around all sides using a 1/2 inch allowance to join these two together. What I strongly suggest is, instead of stitching it, looking at it in this orientation and trying to fold the panels out under and out of the way so you can maneuver the fabric through under your foot, I actually prefer to stitch it in this orientation, folding the panels back this way, so that the fabric that I'm actually stitching is hard up on the needle plate. It's nice and flat and it goes under the foot really easily. And I find it easier to fold my panels over onto the top and out of the way rather than trying to tuck them under and out of the way. It is totally personal preference and it's up to you if you would like to try it that way, because it seems a bit strange to think that we're stitching something that's underneath but we're looking at the top. But it's just something I've tried and tested a lot and it works really well for me. So if anything, just give it a go and see how you find it. So for now though, what we're going to do, and because I've glued these sides down, I'm just going to detach them to give myself a little bit more working room. Here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin my two panels together. So I'm going to fold the outer back and I'm going to match up these bottom corners first and just going to pop a pin in there. And then I might actually do the other bottom corner as well. So from here, pause the video, head over to your machine, and you're going to stitch around all sides of this outer zipper pocket using a 1/2 inch allowance. Make sure you reinforce well at the start and finish, and make sure you do not catch any of your outer back panel in that seam. Once you've stitched that, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've attached your remaining pocket piece to the attached pocket piece, your outer zipper pocket should be looking something like this, which means your pocket is finished and we can move on to installing your main zipper. So to begin, we need to prepare our main zipper, which is our chunky or long pull zipper, ready to attach to our outer panels. So to do that, taking your zipper, and for those making the handbag size like me, it will be your 16-inch zipper. If you're making the tote bag, it'll be an 18-inch zipper. We're going to place it right side down and just make sure you've opened it a couple of inches down and away from the end. Now I'm using zipper off a longer zipper. I've actually cut one down shorter. So for me, I'm going to eyeball and then measure and cross-check that my folds come down the same distance. However, if you've used a zipper that is a fixed length and has zipper stops at the end, you can literally just use those when you fold them out to measure and make sure that your two folds of your main zipper are parallel and equal to each other. So with that being said, what we're going to do is, working on one side at a time, we're just going to fold our zipper. I'm going to fold it about an inch down and out. So essentially this fold is going to be a 90-degree angle and the teeth are going to come out. Sorry, the fold is going to be a 45-degree angle and the teeth are going to come out on a 90-degree angle straight out the side of the zipper tape. So what I'm going to do is just give that fold in the zipper tape just a little press to help crease it. And then I'm going to use a little bit of glue to help hold it down, but I'm also going to hand stitch it down. I just find it holds it a lot better because the teeth are so strong and bossy. They seem to often dictate what happens with the zipper tape. So just sticking that down as best you can, and I'm going to try and hold that in place, set that with the iron. But I'm also going to lift it up, holding the teeth down. I'm just going to grab a needle and thread, and I'm just going to go up and down within the seam allowance, so within about 1/8 out on either side. Hold the ends, and I'm just going to hand stitch these together just to make sure it stays put. You could also machine stitch it, or if you've got a really strong glue or tape, that works fine, just use that. This is just something I prefer to do to make my life easier when I install the zipper on the bag panels. So it's just a few stitches, so I'm going to cut that off and tie off my threads. just like that. So that's the first side done. So from here, all you need to do is repeat that for the second side of your zipper, and making sure again that the angles of the two teeth coming out are parallel with each other and one is not longer or shorter than the other. So once the ends of your long pull zipper are tucked out like this and ready to attach, we're going to go ahead and mark the placement for the zipper on the outer front and outer back panels. So just pop your zipper to the side just for a moment. You're going to take your outer front panel, let's move that out of the way, and along the top edge, in from each side, we're going to measure 1 1/4 inches for both sizes of the bag. And we're just going to make a little mark with tailor's chalk or a fabric marker. So working from one side at a time, we're measuring 1 1/4, make a mark. And this side, 1 1/4, make a mark. And then we're also going to do that for the outer back as well. So now that our marks are in place, we can go ahead and baste and get ready to install the main zipper along the top of these two panels. This is the point where you need to decide which direction you want your bag to open from. So if you place your two panels wrong sides together, just as they will sit once the bag is finished, you can have a bit of a visual idea as to what direction you want it to open. Obviously the outer front panel is the outside of the bag that you want people to see. So if I was carrying it on my left shoulder, which is how I tend to carry my handbags, this is the panel I would want out to the outside world. So I would want my zipper opening from this front end so it's easy for me to access. However, if you prefer your bag to be carried on your right hand shoulder, you would want this end to be your opening end, again, so it's easy for you to access. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to have my opening end of the zipper at this side, so the left hand side of my outer front. And to start, all we're going to do, and this is where sewing glue or tape comes really in handy, all we're going to do is take our main zipper, we're going to place it right side up on top of our outer front, also right side up. We're going to flip our zipper over and we're going to place this edge of the zipper, which is now right sides together with our outer front, and we're going to first glue it in place and then baste it at the machine. To do that, and how we know where to align it, is that where the teeth are coming up and off the zipper tape, they are going to come across and over top of that first 1 1/4 inch mark we just made. So popping a little bit of glue, I'm just going to move these things out of the way because I like to set the glue with the iron as I go. So I'm going to pop a little bit of glue over that 1 1/4 inch mark and a couple of inches along the top within that 1/4 inch allowance. Don't go too crazy on your glue. And then we're going to make sure that the teeth come directly over and off the bag at that 1 1/4 inch mark. And I'm just going to set the glue in that spot first before I work along. And then because I know the zipper is the right sides together, I can actually open it up and get this out of the way. And I'm just going to work along, not stretching the zipper tape, just gently placing it edge of the zipper tape to the edge, raw edge of the outer front. And I'm just going to set the glue as I go so that I know it's held in place. So before I continue down, because the teeth, as you can see, even though I've stitched it, it still wants to lift up because the teeth are so strong on the zippers, which is great for the bag, but when you're installing them, it's a bit of a nuisance at times. So I'm just going to keep that folded, and I'm actually just going to put a pin right just on the underside of those teeth, through the panel and out. Actually, I'm going to try and come back up the zipper tape first there. So that just holds it a bit flatter, and I know that that is as good as it's going to get until it's stitched. So from here, I'm just going to keep gluing all the way along. So I'm coming up to the center mark of my panel, and as I cross over it, Once I've put my zipper on top of that, I'm actually then going to transfer that center mark to the top of my zipper, which is the wrong side of the zipper tape, so that I can see it for when we go to finish up our bag later when we install the lining. So I'm just setting the glue there. So that center mark is here. So I'm just going to mark that in place now so I don't lose it. And then continue adhering my zipper to the top of my outer panel. So when you get down towards the second side of your bag, you're going to stop gluing at that second 1 1/4 inch mark, and that is where we're going to stop our basting stitch as well. So again, just pop a pin in at that mark so that you know that is where you need to stop stitching. And that is looking really good. The first side of our zipper is glued in place. So from here, come with me, we're going to head to the machine and I'll show you how to baste along this edge of the zipper to make sure it's really well secured in place, ready for installation further down the track. So at your machine, you need to make sure you have the zipper foot installed on your machine. You have your needle all the way to one side. Now, in complete contrast to normally how you would stitch a zipper in place, I actually like to have my needle on the right so it's close to the raw edge, and I just eyeball 1/8 of an inch allowance. It just means that I can then make sure that I'm not going too wide, because the last thing I want to do, if I can avoid it, is have to remove basting stitches later on. Make sure you have a fairly long stitch length. I actually prefer slightly less than a basting stitch, just to help really hold areas down, especially over the teeth where it's a little bit bossy down there. And also make sure you have your needle set to the needle down position. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to start right back before we get to the zipper teeth. So I'm just going to lower my foot. We're just going to make a couple of stitches forwards and backwards to lock our threads in. And then we're going to carefully and gently walk up and over those teeth without hitting them. So I'm going to take my pin out. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to lock reverse in and just go back over them again, just to make sure they're really held down flat and not curled over, so that when I install the lining and finish off my bag later, I don't have to worry about it. Once I've gone past those, we're just going to zoom along the top edge again, just eyeballing a 1/8 of an inch allowance. And this is just to tack the zipper in place, ready for later. And when you get to the closed end of the zipper, we're going to make sure we stop stitching at that final pin, or that 1 1/4 inch mark. We're not going to stitch any further past that, so I'm just going to creep up to it, right there, and then I'm going to lock reverse in and stitch away from it, and then finish off. So that's the first side of the zipper based in place, nice and easy. So trim off your threads, come with me and we'll head back to our work surface and continue. So now that the first side of our zipper is based in place, we need to repeat that process to attach the second side of our zipper to our outer back panel. So to do that, the easiest way I've found is to actually close the zipper up, and then we're going to lay our back panel down right side up on our work surface like this first. We're going to take our outer front and place it right sides together with our outer back, and just have the outer front panel sitting maybe about an inch-ish down from the top edge of the outer back. Align the sides up together so that the panels are pretty much straight on top of each other, apart from the height. And we're just going to fold the zipper out and up to align that remaining edge of the zipper with the outer back panel, so everything is nice and square. You'll notice that zipper tape typically has movement, and if we just undid the zipper and stuck this down where we thought the teeth should go, there's a good chance your panels, once the bag is assembled, will end up slightly off center with each other. So I found through trial and error that this is a good way, by aligning the sides and then folding the zipper up to meet the outer back, that it helps ensure the zipper is square and that the panels end up square with each other as well. So I'm actually just going to move my panels down a little bit more. And this time what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to work from the center out in each direction. Again, to make sure my zipper is nice and square and attached well to the outer back so that I know once my bag's finished, it all looks correct. So I'm going to take my glue. Where's it gone? There it is. And I'm just going to work on this second half, or this left hand side half first. So making sure my panels are all in line. I'm just going to go just before my center mark. I'm going to place some glue all the way along to my 1 1/4 inch mark. And then I'm going to just lift my zipper up, making sure it's nice and square and not stretched left or right. And I'm going to join those raw edges together. I'll stick that down. I'm going to set the glue and then I'm going to mark that 1 1/4 inch mark so I know where to start and stop stitching. So now that that end is in place, I'm just going to turn, grab my pin and find my mark, which was just here. A little bit over, a little bit more. There we go. So that's where I'm going to start stitching from. And then, like we did before, I'm going to transfer that center mark to this side of the zipper tape. So that would be there. And then I'm going to continue gluing along this top edge. And then as we come to this open end of the zipper, what we can do then is reach under and actually open the zipper up so that this front panel can be moved out of the way. And then we can look and we can check, okay, so the teeth, are they coming up over that 1 1/4 inch mark? Technically they should be, but depending on if you've stretched your zipper or it's moved or something, or it wasn't measured correctly, it may not. So this is your judgment call as to whether you readjust your whole zipper or whether you go with what you've got. In my case, the teeth are coming up pretty much right over top of that mark, which is awesome. So I'm just going to continue gluing just past that mark. And I'm going to fuse that in place. And again, I'm just going to pop a pin at that end to help hold the zipper tape down prior to stitching. Just like that. So the second side of our zipper is glued in place. So from here, pause the video, head back to your machine, and just like we did for this first side, baste your second half of the zipper in place, starting at that first pin at that 1 1/4 inch mark, stitching all the way along, stitching a few times over the zipper teeth to help hold them nice and flat, and reinforcing to finish off. Once you've done that, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've basted that second side of your main zipper in place, that's all we need to do for the main zipper for now. So it's time to move on to assembling your outer bag. So to assemble your outer bag, first you need to make sure that your panels are not twisted in relation to each other based on your zipper. So the easiest way to do that is to actually close up your main zipper so that you know everything is nice and flat and one panel is not done a loop-de-loop and you're going to have problems later on. Making sure that your outer panels are right sides together, we're just going to match up the sides and the bottom. We're going to pin or clip them together and then stitch. What I like to do, because there's a join part way down each side where the contrast panel joins, is I actually like to pin on just before that seam, and in my case on the fabric side, so I know that that alignment is as accurate as possible. So once the bag's finished and you can look down the side seam, it looks really nice and tidy and it's not off center or off alignment with each other. So I just fold the top panel back, make sure that those seams are nicely on top of each other, hold them together, and then I just pop a pin right just before, right on the fabric. And then I'm going to just clip the rest of it, especially because I have cork, and clips are just easier. Make sure you tuck the tail of your zipper up and out of the way, because we do not want to catch that in this seam. And a couple of clips there, and a couple of clips across the bottom as well. So just like that. So from here, pause the video, head over to your machine, and you're going to stitch down the side, across the bottom and up the other side using a 1/2 inch seam allowance and a normal stitch length of about 2 to 2.5 millimeters. At this stage, you are not stitching the cutout corners, so they will remain open and as basically gaps. And if need be, I've got cork, so I'm going to actually stitch the lower half where my cork is twice, just to give it a bit of extra reinforcement, because it is a bit thicker a fabric than the quilting cotton up top. So that's really up to you if you'd like to do that, depending on what materials you've used. So pause the video, head off and stitch these seams on your outer bag, and then pop back here when you're ready to continue. So once you've stitched these sides and bottom using a 1/2 inch allowance, it's time to trim them down to 1/4 inch. I just like to use a rotary cutter, however you can use scissors if you prefer. And when you're trimming down the side that has the closed end of your zipper, make sure not to zoom off and cut the end of your zipper off, otherwise you'll have awful trouble finishing it off later. Just like that. So from here, we're going to create the corners of our box tote. So to do that, make sure your main zipper is open all the way up now. Just push that pull back. And what we're going to do first is just open our bag out by pushing our front and back panels away from each other so that the base sits flat. So you essentially want it sitting kind of like a triangle or a pyramid, I guess. The front and back are folded in half, right sides together, and they're pulled away from each other, and the base of your bag is sitting nice and flat. So folding it in essentially kind of like a triangle, what we're going to do is prepare each boxed corner and then stitch them. So what I like to do with these thicker seams is, instead of trying to open up the seam allowances to stitch them together, I actually just like to push one to left and one to the right, and then sort of butt them in against each other to get a really nice tidy join. So I'm going to do that first, and because I'm using cork, I'm going to use clips. However, if I was using fabric, I would put 2 pins, one through each lot of seam allowances, to really make sure they stay exactly where I want them as I stitch. And from there, I'm just going to put one either side, and I'm just feeling with my finger in to make sure that, in my case, the cork, otherwise whatever fabric you've got on your contrast, is nicely folded and there's no sort of puckering in that fold. So that one feels nice and flat. This one, not sure about that one. Let me just have a feel. Oh yeah, that feels all right too. Good. So there's that side done. So I'm going to fold that forward, and I'm going to work on the other side. So in this example, this bottom seam at this end is folded to my right. So I'm also going to make sure that this end is folded to the right, just to keep it all nice and tidy along the base, which means my other side seam is going to go to the left. I'm going to butt those seams up together, and I'm going to clip, and then I'm going to put one either side. And clip, and that is ready to stitch. So come with me, we'll head to the machine, and I'll show you how I like to stitch box corners to make sure they're really secure, really well stitched, and then we will move on with the next step. So to stitch the bottom corners of your bag, what you need to do is make sure you have your normal foot or walking foot on your machine, your needle set to the needle down position, and a normal stitch length set of about 2 to 2.5 millimeters. I also like to use a thread that matches my outer fabric. So I've got the red cork, so I've put red thread in my machine, which is what I also used for part of the side seams and the bottom seam as well. And we're going to stitch with a 1/2 inch allowance. So working on one bottom corner at a time, what we're going to do is just pop the edge under your foot. And I actually like to start maybe about 3/4 of an inch in front of that side fold, so that I can line up the edge of the fabric with my allowance on my needle plate. If you start right back here, it's very hard to get an exact measurement because there's not a lot of fabric out this side. So I start a little bit forward, find my 1/2 inch on my needle plate, and then what I'm going to do is reverse back to that fold, keeping my fabric and my panel nice and straight and square. Then I'm going to stitch all the way forwards nice and gently, maintaining that 1/2 inch allowance. And as I get to these center folds here, what I'm going to do, just get my little ruler, is make sure that the ones underneath that are facing that way, which are going to come in and be stitched first, are still tucked under as they come onto the needle plate. And I'm going to hold this really tight while I take my clip off. And I'm going to stitch closer, and just before I would be hitting the seam allowance on the underside, I'm just going to lift my foot and check and look under and just scooch those seam allowances back so that everything sits really nice and flat as I stitch up and over that bulky area in the middle. And once I get past it, I'm actually going to reverse and stitch all the way back over it before coming forward again. So it'll have 3 passes this time and make it a really tight join, just because there's all those extra layers in this area. And then we're just going to continue all the way to this front folded edge. And then reinforce a little bit to finish off. So what I actually like to do with box corners on any of the bags I make is take my work out, turn the bag over, and then stitch that whole seam again. Again, checking that the 1/2 inch allowance is correct, reinforcing over the whole seam, and it just provides me more reinforcement, and you've stitched from the different angle, and I just find it just makes it for a really tidy finish. There's less chance of seeing your stitches, and it takes no time at all to do. So if you would like to do that, go ahead and do that now. So from here, once you've finished that seam, trim off your threads, fold your bag out and around so that you are then looking at the second box corner for your bag. Stitch that, reinforcing over that center fold again, just like we did for the first time. And once you've stitched this seam and you're happy with how it's looking, pop back here and we will continue. So once we've stitched both bottom corners of our tote, we can trim those seams down to 1/4 inch before turning our bag right side out. So when you're ready, turn your bag right side out by grabbing the base or the contrast panels, turn them through, and then reach in with your hand and really push those bottom corners out so they're nice and crisp. And I just like to give that bottom seam a bit of a finger press to help it sit nice and flat, especially in that center join where there was extra bulk. So from here, just a couple of little steps left to go on this outer bag. Firstly, at the top, and I'm just going to fold this so you can see it better, at the top, at the closed end of the zipper, we're just going to pin the length of zipper that's left down the side, ready for when we install the lining later on. So to do that, all I do is fold the zipper down so that the zipper tape is essentially curving down on a nice gentle angle from where we stopped stitching to down at the side seam. I probably have the zipper tape cross over the side seam at about an inch and a quarter down. I don't measure it, I kind of just eyeball it. and I don't pull the zipper tape so that there's bunching up where the tape is joined to the top. I just sort of let it sit where it's naturally going to sit in a nice gentle curve. And once I'm happy with that, I'm going to put a pin in, going up that zipper tape side so it's held there. Now that pin will stay in while we stitch the lining in place, so make sure it's inserted well and that it is just away from that 1/4 inch allowance where we're going to stitch later on. Repeat that for the other side of the zipper tape as well. Again, just curving it nice and gently away and down from the top, and you want this side to cross over that side seam at the same point as where the first side does. So you don't want one coming up like this or one coming way down like that. You want to make sure that where they cross is right over top of that side seam. So that's those done, and from here all that's left to do on our outer bag is install our bag feet if you're including bag feet in your tote or handbag. So installing bag feet is a very similar process to installing a magnetic snap, and if you're not sure how to do this, then feel free to pop over to our YouTube channel. We have a free tutorial there called Installing a Magnetic Snap, and there we go into a lot more detail and give you some real tips and tricks on how to install snaps and bag feet to get a really good fit and make sure it's all secure and well fastened within your bag. So for those who don't need to watch that tutorial, all we're going to do is simply pop a prong of each side from one bag feet through each of the slits that we made earlier, and I just like to put my hand in to press against the stabilizer so it doesn't accidentally, there's the word, come off from the fleece or foam that's on the inside. So I'm just going to wiggle a prong through. I've got it through the cork, and I'm just trying to find the slits in the stabilizer because sometimes it can be a bit finicky to go through all those layers. Where are they? There we are. So I can feel that that's popped through, so that's pushed through, so it's nice and flush with the cork. And then I'm going to open my bag up. You can see the prongs poking up there through the stabilizer. All I'm going to do is pop my washer down on top of those prongs so that one prong is through each slit, and then just like a snap, I'm just going to bend the prongs out and push the prongs down flush with the bottom of the bag. Oh. So they're sitting nice and flat, just like that. And that's the first bag foot installed. That's all there is to it. So once you've done one, you'll be able to do the others. So feel free to pause the video, go and install the rest of your bag feet. And if you're making the tote bag, pop back here and I will talk you through how to install the last 5th bag foot before moving on. So pause the video, head off and do what you need to with the bag feet, and pop back here when you're ready to continue. So once you've installed your 4 outer bag feet, this is what the base of your bag should be looking like. If you're making the tote bag size, you will have a 5th bag foot. Now, I'm not going to install a 5th one because I'm doing the handbag size and it doesn't need it. However, if you're doing the tote bag size, all you're going to do simply is measure the distance along the bottom seam, which typically should be around 10 inches. You're going to find the center point, so around 5 inches, and you're going to make a small slit either side of that seam using your seam ripper or small little scissors at that center mark. Make sure when you cut that little slit that you're only going through your fabric you're interfacing in your fleece or foam. You're not going through the seam or the stitches themselves. Once you've made those 2 small slits, you're going to insert your bag foot prongs through those slits, and the washer on the inside will straddle the seam that runs along the bottom. So that is how to install the 5th one if you're making the tote bag size. For now though, that is our outer bag complete. All the components are done. It's looking fantastic. I hope you're really excited and proud of what you've created so far. So from here, we're going to put that to the side and we're going to move on to the next section, which is creating your inner zipper pocket. To create your inner zipper pocket, we're going to follow much the same process as we did for our outer zipper pocket. So you're going to need one of your inner zipper pocket pieces, and we're going to be attaching that to one of our lining pieces. So to start with, we're going to be drawing our 3 lines down for our box from the top edge of one of the long sides. Now if you have directional fabric, you'll need to make sure that you have it orientated correctly prior to drawing your box. As you can see, the fabric I have here is not really directional, so it doesn't matter which long edge I measure my lines up from. And just to recap, if you need any further help or want tips and tricks or a further in-depth explanation of creating zipper pockets, make sure you check out the Creating a Zipper Pocket tutorial on our YouTube channel. And I've popped a link to that video in the description below. So to start, we're just going to work on the wrong side of the panel, the interfaced side. And we're going to start by drawing our 3 lines. The first line is going to be 1 inch down from the top. So as you may know, I find it easier to draw my lines working in this orientation. And if I had directional fabric, I would take note of the top and then rotate my panel to draw my lines and then rotate it back. So we're going to draw the first line at 1 inch in, a second line 1/4 inch on from that, and a third line a further 1/4 inch on from that. And then depending on the size you're making is going to depend on the size of the box. So I'm making the handbag size, so I'm going to mark the center of my panel, which is 4 inches because it's 8 inches wide. And from there, I'm going to measure 3 inches out on either side. And that's where I'm going to close up my box, making a total distance of 6 inches for my zipper pocket. And I'm going to draw my angled lines as well. If you're making the tote bag size, you're going to measure 4 inches out on either side, making the total distance between the 2 lines 8 inches. So once you've drawn your box, you can rotate your panel back around if you've drawn it upside down like I have. And we're just going to take one of our lining panels that we're going to attach the zipper pocket to, and I'm actually just going to start by marking the center top of that panel so that I can align my pocket piece, and when we come to install the lining on the bag, we can match that up to the center mark on our bag panel. So to do that, just simply fold it in half, matching long sides. Give it a press and give it a mark. I'm actually going to mark that on both sides of the panel. So from here, we've got our center mark. We can square up our lining panel on our cutting mat with the lines so that we know that everything is nice and square with each other. And I just usually like to eyeball, especially down the bottom, to see that the corner points come to the same marks on the cutting mat and that everything is nice and square. And then we're going to position our pocket piece right sides together, and we're going to ensure that the top edge of the pocket piece is 2 inches down from the top raw edge of the lining panel, and that's for both sizes. So just taking your ruler, we're going to line up the center. I like to use the center of my ruler, and I'm going to line it up 2 inches down, checking all the lines are lined up with my cutting mat, and then I'm going to butt my pocket piece up underneath my ruler, using my center mark at the center of my ruler there, and that sits nice and tidily. So I'm going to take my ruler away, and again, just like for the outer zipper pocket, I'm just going to eyeball, and it looks like it sort of needs to twist that way slightly, but otherwise I'm pretty happy with the placement of that. So keeping that there, I'm just going to pop 3 pins through the fabric to hold it in place. And then just like we did for our outer zipper pocket, you'll need to pause the video, head over to your machine, and you're going to stitch around the outer lines of your box to attach using a normal stitch length of about 2 to 2.5 millimeters, and make sure you reinforce well at the start and finish as well. Once you've done that, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've stitched around the outer edge of your box to attach your pocket piece to your lining, it's time to cut it open and also snip out into those corners as well. So from here, pause the video, head over to your pressing station and turn your pocket through to the wrong side and give each of those edges around the box a really good press to help set that seam. Once you've done that, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've turned your box through to the wrong side of the lining panel and you've given it a really good press, it should be looking something like this. So from here, grab your tape or your glue or your pins and proceed to prepare your box and install your zipper ready for stitching. Just like that. So once you have your once you have your zipper stuck in place around in the inside of your box, pause the video, head over to your machine, and you're going to stitch around the outside of the box just like we did for the outer zipper pocket, using a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and almost a top stitching length of about 3 millimeters. Make sure you stitch 3 times over the short ends of the zipper to make sure they're really well secured and held to the fabric. And again, I prefer not to do too many reinforcing stitches. I think it looks tidier if you dive your threads through to the wrong side, tie them off in a knot, and then trim them down that way. So keep that in mind for your pocket. So from here, pause the video, head to your machine, stitch around the box to attach, and pop back here when you're ready to continue. So once you've stitched your zipper in place, it should be looking something like this within the box for your zipper pocket. So before we go ahead and attach the remaining pocket piece, just have a feel around the edges in case there's any tape or glue that's overhanging. You want to remove that now before the bag is finished. So from what I can tell, I think all of it was covered. There's just a bit there. The rest was all covered by the zipper tape itself, which is really good. So I'm just going to detach the zipper tape, lift up the sticky tape and pull that out, and that's much tidier. So from here, you're going to take your remaining zipper pocket piece, you're going to place it right sides together with your attached pocket piece. And now this pocket is actually the pocket we're going to turn the bag through at the end. So instead of stitching all sides like we did for our outer zipper pocket, we're only going to stitch the sides and the top. And we're going to leave this bottom edge open to turn the bag through once we finish constructing it. So to do that, and as you know, I like to actually have my pocket pieces on the bottom right up against the needle plate, and I fold my lining out of the way. So what we're going to do essentially is have it around this way, so it's upside down. We're going to stitch up this first side of our pocket, and I'm just going to place a couple of pins in there to hold the panels together. And then we're going to stitch across the top. So we're going to unfold those and fold the top down. And then we're going to turn and fold the other side out of the way, and I'm going to put one almost all the way down there. So that is our pocket pieces assembled. So from here, pause the video. Just like we did for the outer pocket, head to your machine and make sure that your lining panel is on the top. The pocket pieces you're stitching are underneath. You're going to stitch up the first side, across the top, and down the second side. Reinforce at the start and finish. You're going to stitch with a 1/2 inch allowance and a normal stitch length of about 2 to 2.5 millimeters. And once you've done that, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've stitched your second pocket piece to your first and you've left the bottom open, this is what it should be looking like. So if you've seen our free creating a zipper pocket tutorial on YouTube, you'll know that one little step I like to add on to the end of creating a zipper pocket is to trim the bottom corners on an angle to reduce the bulk when we then turn it through to stitch closed at the end. So I'm just going to go and do that now. And I'm just going to stitch right up next to the stitching and up on a fairly sharp slope and probably a good 1 to 1.5 inches of height, just to help trim it down. Just makes things easier when you close up that pocket at the end. So that's my corners trimmed off, and that is the zipper pocket complete. So it's looking really good. So from here we're going to move on to assembling your lining. So to assemble your lining, you're going to need the lining panel that we've just attached the zipper pocket to, and you're also going to need your remaining lining panel. To start, we just need to find and mark the center top of that lining panel so that when we attach it to our main bag, we have reference points to line everything up with. So just making a mark there. And then to assemble our lining, we're simply going to follow the same steps as we did for our outer bag. So we're going to place our two lining panels right sides together. We're going to match up side seams and bottom seam and stitch. Now I'm actually going to do it this way so that I can keep an eye on my pocket. Even though it's very far from the edges, I still don't want to risk catching it in seam, because if I can avoid unpicking, then that would be wonderful. So once you have your two lining panels pinned or clipped together, pause the video, head to your machine. You're going to stitch the sides and across the bottom using a 1/2 inch allowance and a normal stitch length of about 2 to 2.5 millimeters. Once you've done that, pop back here and we will continue. So once you've stitched the side and the bottom seams, it's time to trim them down to 1/4 inch, ready to create our box corners. So from here, just like we did for the outer bag, we're going to start by pulling our two lining panels away from each other and essentially folding them in half right sides together so that we can encourage the base of the lining to sit nice and flat. From there, we're just going to let the bag fold kind of into a triangle or a pyramid, and we're going to go ahead and pin or clip, if you prefer, these bottom corners together. So I'm going to push one seam to the right, one seam to the left. I'm going to butt them up against each other so the seams match nicely. And now, because I'm using just plain old quilting cotton for this lining, I can use pins, and I'm going to place one in each seam allowance. So there's essentially a double pin in the center, just to hold that in place. I don't think I need pins on the outer because it's a very short distance and it's not really going to go anywhere. So I'm just going to leave that like that. Fold that down and work on the remaining one. Now my seam allowance here is pointing to the left, so I'm going to follow it across and make sure this one is also pointing to the left. So that means the other one needs to go to the right. And that's ready to stitch. So once you have your two box corners pinned or clipped in place, pause the video, head to your machine. Just like we did for our outer bag, you're going to stitch across using a 1/2 inch allowance and a normal stitch length of about 2 to 2.5 millimeters. You only need to stitch this once. You don't need to reinforce it like we did for the outer bag, simply because this is sitting in the outer bag. So the outer bag is the one that's going to be taking the weight and the pressure of what you've got in it. So pause the video, head off and stitch your box corners closed, and pop back here when you're ready to continue. So once you've stitched your box corners closed, your lining should be looking something like this. So just go ahead and trim those two seams down to 1/4 inch just to reduce the bulk somewhat. And then from here, our lining is complete and it's ready to be assembled with our outer bag. So it's time to move on to putting it all together. So to put your classic carryall together, you're going to need your outer bag, your lining, and some pins or clips if you prefer. What we first need to do is make sure that the main zipper on our outer bag is open all the way. And we also need to make sure that the zipper on the inner zipper pocket in the lining is also open all the way. From here, you need to decide which panel you want your inner zipper pocket to sit against. So typically when I create tote bags for myself, I like to have the inner zipper pocket against the back panel. That is the one that sits against my body. I just find it easier to access the panel or the pocket when it's against my body and on the back of the bag, so to speak. However, you can also have it on the inside of the front panel if you prefer. It's really personal preference. So once you've decided which panel you would like your pocket on the lining to be on, that will determine which way up you have your lining. So essentially what we're going to do is squish our outer bag into our lining. Now because I like to have the zipper pocket on the back of the bag, I'm going to make sure that the back of the bag here is against my work surface, and my zipper pocket, or the side of the lining that has the zipper pocket, is also flat on the work surface, which means that my outer front here, which is on the top, which I'm looking at, and the top side of the lining, which has no pocket, those two will be back to back, and that is how I would like it. So once you've orientated your lining the way you want it based on your bag, we're going to literally just squish up the bottom of our outer to start with. Don't panic if it looks a bit scary, we will reshape the bag at the end. And once you've gathered up the bottom of your bag, you're going to just literally shove it into the lining quite a wee way down, so that ideally the top of the outer is just inside the top of the lining. Once you've shoved it in there, you can let it go and it will kind of expand a bit to fill the void. And then we can start to match up the top edges of the two bags together. So I'm just going to pull it down a bit more. So from here it's simply just a case of matching up center marks, side seams, and then the rest of the top edges together. So I'm going to start with this center mark here on the lining and the outer, and I'm just going to pin those together. And I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to do the other center mark. So I've got center mark of lining, center mark of outer, and pin. Then I'm going to move to the side seam, so I'm just going to squish my bag down that way, and this is where the closed end of the zipper is, and you can see the zipper tape curving down and away from the top edge. So I'm going to match up these side seams, and me being me, I like to make sure that on my lining, if the lining side seam is facing, in this case, to the right, then I have it nice and flat and the top also faces to the right, which means I'm going to push the outer side seam to the left. So I'm going to do the other side seams here. So matching up those side seams, pushing one seam allowance in the opposite direction to the other. So from here it's just a case of matching in the rest of the top edges together. So literally just pulling those two apart, walking your fingers in to find the center, match the top edge together, and I'm actually going to put a pin either side as well, just because we're only stitching a 1/4 inch allowance, seam allowance, and it's quite small. So the less I have to fuss with fabric moving on its own, the better. So because my contrast panel on the outer front is the vinyl and I don't want to create holes in it, I'm just using pins, but I'm putting them sideways, and I'm making sure I'm only pinning within the seam allowance so that the holes that they're creating will not be shown on the outside of the bag. And at the end where the closed end of the zip is and it curves down and away from the top of the outer bag, you just want to feel with your thumb and almost curve it up and away, almost sort of in a bit of an arc, to help ensure that the zipper tape is sitting nice and flat. And you'll be able to feel with your thumb and finger if it is sitting nice and flat, and then just pin to hold that in place. So there we go, we are all pinned together, everything is matching up really nicely. I'm just going to make sure my inner zipper pocket's out of the way as well. So from here, come with me, we'll head to the machine and we will stitch to attach our bags together. So to stitch your two bags together, you're going to need to have your zipper foot installed on your machine, your needle all the way to the left, Make sure you have a normal stitch length set of about 2 to 2.5 millimeters, and your needle is set to the needle down position so your work is held in place when you stop. I'm going to start on the back panel so I can see my zipper pockets, and I'm also going to just check that my outer zipper pocket is folded down and out of the way so there's no chance it accidentally gets lifted up and caught in the seam. All we're going to do is stitch around the top edge of the two bags using a 1/4 inch allowance. So to start, I'm just going to make a couple of stitches forwards and backwards to lock my threads in. And then I'm just going to start working my way around. As I stitch, I like to have a hand in the front and a hand at the back to just put a little bit of tension on the two panels, pulling them apart slightly, nothing too vigorous, just to help keep everything flat and in line with each other. And it makes it easier to follow the seam allowance as well. So I'm just going to work my way slowly around this top panel first. And as you come up to the open end of the zipper where you're going to cross over the zipper teeth, just take your time nice and slowly up and over them, and I strongly recommend making a few stitches over the first lot of teeth, putting reverse on, and then actually just stitching back over them just to really make sure they're secured between those layers of fabric. Then take reverse off and stitch back over them so they've got 3 passes at that point, just because it's a little bit more bulky. And then over the seam allowance. And then again for the second lot of zipper teeth, I'm just going to gently walk over them, put reverse on and go back. And then take it off and come forward again. Then I'm going to continue down what is the front of the bag. So as you come to what is the closed end of the zipper, where the zipper is curving down and away from that top edge, again just keep a bit of tension on there and just feel with your finger and thumb to make sure that the zipper tape underneath is not buckled or folded. You want it to be really nice and flat, just right where you're going to stitch, and if need be, like I just did, remove your pin and have a little peek just to make sure it is going to sit nice and flat in that 1/4 inch allowance area. Once you're happy with that, you can hold your layers together and stitch over the first end to secure that one. Readjust, stitch over the seam allowances, nice and steady. There we go, and then again just feel for that second curved end of the zipper. Make sure it's nice and curved. Make sure you maintain your 1/4 inch allowance as best you can. And head back to where you started. So when you get back to where you started, make a few stitches to reinforce and then you can finish off. So what I like to do at this point is actually trim my threads and then stitch this top seam a second time, looking at it from the inside of the bag. And the reason I do that is A, to give it more strength around the top and the join of the bags, but B, also to ensure that the 1/4 inch allowance is maintained around the entire distance of the top, so that the zipper looks nice and even and it's not wider in some areas because you've stitched really narrow and then narrow in other areas because you've come in too wide. So that is just a personal preference thing. It's just me being particular. So if you would like to do that, all that we need to do is just trim off our threads and then get set up. So instead of having my bag over the throat of my machine, I'm actually just going to sit it up on the needle plate now. I'm going to fold the top back and I'm going to start essentially stitching the same seam again, but I'm now looking at it from the other side of the bag. So now I'm looking at it from the outer bag and I'm just going to whiz around it once more just to make sure I have maintained that 1/4 inch allowance all the way around. So that's looking really good. There's a couple of areas that I was a little bit too narrow in, so I'm glad that I did go around a second time just to really make sure that seam allowance is spot on. So from here, come with me and head back to your workstation and we will continue. So once you've attached your 2 bags around the top using a 1/4 inch allowance, the next step is to turn them through the right way. Before we do that though, we're just going to trim off these little tails at the open end of our zipper, just to tidy things up, and we're just going to cut them down so they're level with the top edges of the outer bags. Just like that. There we go. So from here it is literally time to turn our bag right side out. So to do that, you're just going to reach inside the zipper pocket. And what I like to do first is grab the 2 pins. So find which side is the closed end of the zipper. And remember back when we finished installing that zipper, we put 2 pins in to hold the zipper tape down along that side seam. We now need to take those pins out if you can find them, so that we don't accidentally stab ourselves when we're turning our bag right side out. So it looks like my 2 have both magically wiggled themselves out because I don't know where they are. Can't say I've had that happen before, but I'm sure they will turn up when I turn my bag out. So if you can find your pins, this is the time to remove them. And then from there what we're going to do is we're going to reach in the zipper pocket and again scrunch up the bottom of the bag as small as you can make it, and then we're going to curve it up and start feeding it out that zipper and zipper pocket. You will need to kind of really squish it into almost like a tube or a sausage to really get it to fit through that pocket. But trust me, it should fit, and we will reshape once we've finished. And I'm being wary because I have 2 pins in there somewhere and I don't really want to get stabbed. So just working your bag through the zipper pocket, slowly peeling it off. Try not to force anything, because the last thing you want at this stage is to damage the zipper or the pocket and have to try and fix it up. And once you've pulled your outer through as far as you can, kind of peel the zipper pocket off. Oh, there's 1 pin, that's good. No, that's not a pin. And then continue pulling the lining through. so that everything, oh, there goes the other pin. Excellent, okay. So we have our lining, it is all the way popped out and things are looking really good. So before we go and close that pocket up, just have a quick check around the top edge to make sure you're happy with your stitching, how the zipper looks coming out of the seams. If you've got any threads poking out like I do, just pull them off, or if need be, snip them, and just make sure it's all tidy. Again, before we close up the zipper pocket, if you are including a piece of plastic in the bottom of your Classic Carryall, now's the time to insert it. So it literally just sits there, it doesn't get attached to the base at all, but all you need to do before we close up our pocket is actually put it in. So you just curve it in half, make sure prior that you have cut nice little curves around the outer corners so that it doesn't poke and over time damage the fabric of the lining and of your bag. I'm just going to bend it, slide it in the pocket, and just sit it down in the base of the bag. And there's no way I'll be able to show you that, but I can tell you that it's just sitting right there in the base, and it will fairly stay put, especially once the bag is upright and the lining is sitting down on top of it. So from here, we're going to close up our pocket. So I'm just going to fold the lining out of the way. And all we're going to do to close up our pocket is fold each edge in 1/4 of an inch. And I honestly do not measure this, I just eyeball it. You can measure it if you prefer, it's really up to you. And I'm just going to give it a little press out to each side seam to help create that nice 1/4 inch fold. And I'm going to turn the bag over and repeat on the other side of the pocket as well. And then from here, it's just a case of matching up the folded edges and pinning them together ready to stitch. As you may remember, back when we created this zipper pocket, we trimmed some of that seam allowance off to reduce bulk. This is where that comes into play. So for this seam, which I'm holding, I'm going to have it facing to the left. I'm going to then fold it over 1/4 inch and fold my sides together and pin. And then what I'm going to do on the other end is I'm also going to fold it to the left. So if I turn my bag, I'm going to fold that one also to the left, which means it is actually the opposite direction to the other end. And fold. And that just helps spread out the bulk and help the seam sit just that little bit flatter, especially once it's stitched and tucked down inside the lining. I just find just that little tiny little tip just gives a noticeable difference to the bottom and the feel of that pocket in the lining. So from here, we're just matching up the rest of the folds and pinning or clipping to hold them together. Just like that. So from here, pause the video, head over to your machine. You're going to stitch this pocket closed using a very narrow 1/16 of an inch seam allowance, a normal stitch length of about 2 to 2.5 millimeters, and make sure you reinforce well at the start and finish. Pop back here when you're ready to continue. So once you've stitched that bottom edge of your pocket closed, it should be looking something like this. So from here, all that's left to do is to tuck that pocket down into the lining and really give the bottom corners of that pocket a good push out and roll them out as much as you can. You can use a chopstick or a very blunt pencil or something if need be to really push them out. However, if you trimmed the sides of them and then folded them in opposite directions like I've just done, they should just pop out and sit as really quite nice and flat and almost barely noticeable once you're down in the bag. So mine are nicely rolled out. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but they're pretty much pushed out as far as they can go. So that's really good. So I can close up my zipper pocket and I can tuck the lining down into the bag, and I can make sure that my piece of plastic has gone for a walk. So I'm just going to move that back down to the base. There we go. And that is looking awesome. I'm so happy with how this is turning out. Okay, so I'm going to just check that my inner zipper pocket is sitting nice and flat all around all sides. And then I'm also going to check my outer zipper pocket is sitting flat around all sides as well. So it feels really good. So I can close that one up. Close that one up. So all that's left to do from here for the bag is finish off with some top stitching and finish off the end of our zipper. So from here, once you've checked and felt and everything's in place as it should be, from here we're going to take the time and we're going to roll out this top seam, and we're going to give it a really good press from both the inside and the outside, working slowly but by slowly all the way around. And once we've done that, then we will top stitch it in place. So once you've given that top edge of your Classic Carryall a really good press to help set those seams down in place, come with me, we're going to head to the machine and I'll show you how to top stitch that to finish. So to top stitch around the top edge of your Classic Carryall, I recommend using a walking foot. You're going to need thread that matches the outer fabric and your lining fabric in your machine. A nice top stitching length of a good sort of 3 to 3.5 millimeters, and make sure you have your needle set to the needle down position so that when you stop, your work is held in place. For this row of top stitching, I'm actually going to be using a triple stitch. The process is exactly the same as for a normal top stitch, it just takes longer to work your way around, but gives a nice thick top stitching row, and I just really like the look of it. And we're going to stitch using a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So starting on your back panel, I'm just going to place your bag under your foot and lining up with that 1/8 allowance, ready to start stitching. Place your foot down and we're just going to hold the tails, and now because we're top stitching, we're not going to make lots of reinforcing stitches. All I'm going to do is, if I was using a normal stitch, would just be to make one stitch forward and back just to lock my threads in, and then when I finish I would repeat that same, pass my threads through to the lining side, knot them and actually dive them down in between the layers to hide them. But because I'm using a triple stitch, it's going to do that for me anyway. So just making a little stitch forward and back to start, and we're just going to work our way nice and steadily around this top edge, maintaining that 1/8 of an inch seam allowance as best we can. And as you stitch around, what I suggest you do every now and again is just stop, push with your underneath fingers, push the lining back under and pull the outer so that they're both nicely rolled away from that zipper in order to get a really even appearance, I suppose, of the zipper tape that's showing, so that the outer or the lining is not sort of lifting up in some places, making your main zipper look uneven and not as well installed as it actually is. So as you go, just maneuver your bag around your machine, and if need be, you can squish it to get it to do what you want. And as you come up to the first pair of seam allowances and the side seams, what I recommend if you have something is a height jumper or height compensation tool, just to lift the back of the foot up so that the foot is level coming up and over that thicker area. It will first of all make it easier on your machine, but also usually results in tidier top stitching stitches as well. So just a little tip there, just to lift the back of the foot and walk nice and slowly over that bulk. And then ease down the other side as well. Now if it was a sharper curve or slope coming down, I would also put this under the front of the foot to keep the foot level the whole way through, but because it's not a heavily sharp incline, I'm not going to fuss at the front, just the back. So just maneuvering, what have I got caught? My zipper I think is caught around the back there. There we go. So I'm going to stitch across the front now. So when you get back to the start, again, just make a couple of stitches forwards and back to reinforce, not too much reinforcing though. And then we're going to finish off, and that looks really good. And this all stitched, beautiful. So from here, just dive your top threads through to your lining side, tie a nice little reef knot off, and then dive those in between the layers to hide that knot, and then pop back to your work surface and we will continue. So once you've top stitched around the top edge of your Classic Carryall, it should be looking something like this. And hopefully you're as excited and proud of what you've created as I am with my sample. I think it's looking awesome. So all that we've got left to do is just finish off the tail of our main zipper, and then we will be done. So to do that, we're just going to put our main bag to the side for now, and we're going to take our last little piece of fabric that's been hanging out waiting for its turn for this whole process and we're going to prepare what is our zipper tab. So to do that, first we're going to fold each of the short edges over 1/2 inch to the wrong side, and we're going to give it a little press, and I also suggest gluing or taping those ends down so they can't move while we go ahead and install the tab. So I'm just going to measure 1/2 inch and give it a quick little press, and same at the other end. So we're essentially enclosing all the raw edges, and that's 1/2 inch there. Give it a press and then glue those ends down or tape them so they're secure. Just like that. So from here, all we're going to do on the wrong side of this piece of fabric is rule a line down the center. So it'll be 3/4 inches in from each side, just so that we have a center mark and essentially a folding line to fold those long sides into. So just using your ruler, mark a center line. And then from here, we're going to fold each long side into that center line and give that fold a really good press. Just like that. So once you have your tab looking something like this, all we're going to do to finish the pressing part of it is to fold it in half, again wrong sides together, so that is the side where you can see the raw edges of your piece of fabric. Fold it over, matching short finished edges, match those nice folded sides together, and give that top fold a good little press to help set that edge. So that is our zipper tab all ready to go. So from here you need to decide which is going to be the top side and which is going to be the bottom. For mine, I think I'm going to use this side as the top. It's just got more silver glitter on it, whereas this side has a big sort of black patch. So that's going to be the bottom. So on the bottom side of your tab, what we can actually do is open up our tab and we can glue these two long sides down that are going to be on the bottom. So just opening it back out ever so slightly, take some glue or tape, and we're just going to glue the long sides down just on that bottom half so that they are stuck in place. And again, just set that with your iron if you've used glue. Just like that. So now we have a tab that has a top pocket, which is where our zipper is going to go in once we've prepared the end of the zipper, and we have a glued down bottom, which will then be all ready to stick down once we slide this onto our zipper. So we're just going to put that to the side for now, and we're going to move on back to our main tote to prepare the end of our zipper, ready to install our tab. So to prepare the end of your main zipper, ready to install your zipper tab, first what we need to do is close the zipper up all the way. And then what we're going to do is essentially sit the bag, the tote, on its side so that we are looking, and we have the tail of the main zipper out on our pressing table, and we're looking at the right side of the zipper, just like I've got here. From there, we're going to measure from essentially where the zipper comes out and away from the bag. So sitting it like this, you can kind of see where that right angle or that bend or the corner, I suppose, is going to be, and that's essentially our measuring point. So from there, we're going to measure out as per the pattern directions and we're going to mark at 1.5 inches, 2.5 inches and 3.5 inches along that zipper tail. So just holding your tote with one hand, and I just like to place my ruler next to it, and I've got my, there we go, my 3-inch mark is essentially at that join. So I'm doing this backwards because, you know, left-handers, we do things backwards sometimes. So I know that from there, my furthest mark is going to be 3 inches. So on my ruler, that's going to be at 0, like that. And then the next mark in from that is going to be 2.5. So I'm going to come in 1/2 inch, and I'm going to mark. And then the first mark we need to do is at 1.5. So from 3 to 1.5 is 1.5. So I'm going to make a mark there. So these marks are our folding and cutting marks. The first 2 marks are where we're going to fold and hand baste, or you can machine baste your zipper folded and closed. And the final mark is where we're going to cut off the extra of our zipper. So once you have your 3 marks in place on both sides of the zipper tape, we can stand our tote up, put our ruler to the side, and first what we're going to do is we're just going to cut off the end of the zipper tape at that 3-inch mark we made. So just cut it off as square and tidily as you can, just like that. I'm going to tidy that up a bit. Just like that. So now we have a nice flush end of our zipper. I'll just tidy that bit up. And from here, what we need to do is fold our zipper tape into thirds. So to do that, I'm actually going to turn my tote around this way. So my tail is now up in the air. I've got a couple of clips, and what I've found is easiest to do is to fold one side in as square as you can with the teeth. So we don't want the zipper tape sitting like this where it's further across at the top and not so much at the bottom. You really want to pull the bottom across so that it's parallel, or the edge of the zipper tape is parallel with the other edge. So fold that into thirds. You'll have a little bit of tape out on the side next to the teeth, and then fold the other one over as well. And again, you want to line up those marks you just made. They need to match over top of each other. And that's also how you will know that you have your zipper tape nice and parallel and not skewed or wider at the top or the bottom. So once you have your tape folded into thirds and your teeth are sitting down the center and they're not off to one side, all you need to do is just place a clip or some other sort of, you could pin it if you want, but I think clips just work a lot easier, underneath that first mark we made and between those 2 marks we made, just to hold it while we stitch those closed. Some people may prefer to glue this down. However, I've found I like the flexibility of stitching so that if I want, I can readjust. And once the zipper tab is installed, the first mark we made is actually going to be showing. So stitching is great because then you can remove the stitches and it becomes invisible. So taking a needle and thread, or at your machine if you would prefer, we're going to simply baste at these 2 marks, so your 1.5 and your 2.5 points, to hold the zipper tape together and nicely folded while we install the zipper tab. So I'm just going up and around the teeth just a couple of times, making sure I've got all edges of the zipper tape, and I'm just going to knot that off. So this stitching at this 1.5 mark will be removed once the tab is installed. So that is why I've used black thread on my red zipper, so I can actually see it to remove it. So I'm just going to grab my other piece of thread and also secure at that 2.5 inch mark as well. Just like that. So from here we have our 2 points or measurements marked. Our zipper is folded into thirds and held in place. So we can take our clips off, and from here all that's left to do is install our zipper tab. So to install the zipper tab, I strongly suggest you have some sewing glue or you use tape or something, because essentially what we're going to do is stick the zipper tab in place and then we're going to stitch it. You can use pins or clips to hold it in place if you prefer, but honestly I think that is just asking for trouble and makes it really difficult. So if you haven't already, grab yourself some sewing glue or tape. We're going to use quite a bit of it to attach the tab to the zipper end prior to stitching. So to begin, first all I'm going to do is place a little bit of glue along the teeth, just shy of the length of the tab. So looking at it, the tab's going to come to just before my stitching, which is as planned. So I'm going to put a bit of glue on top of the teeth to just before the stitching, and I'm also going to put some down the side on the actual zipper tape itself. And if I've gone too far, I'm not too concerned because I can wash the glue away after, once the zipper tab is installed. Once you have some glue on the top there, actually will be really helpful to put some on the bottom too at this point. I'll do that. So now that we've got glue everywhere, without getting on our fingers, what we're going to do is slide the tab into that top pocket that we've left on our zipper tab. So just pulling back those folds slightly, we're just going to slide the zipper tab in, and you want the end of the zipper to come to just on that fold in the fabric, so that when it's folded in half, the underside, which if I just lift this back slightly, the underside comes level with the front side. You're essentially sandwiching the end of the zipper. So if you haven't come far enough, or you've come too far and your ends do not meet, take it off, readjust, and then re-stick. Looking at mine, I think I'm pretty level, so I'm actually quite happy with that. And from here we can just feel, before we go and stick everything down, we want to feel that the zipper is fairly horizontal within the tab once the sides are folded under. So we can fold those folds back and essentially enclose the end of the zipper. So I'm just going to stick one side down. I think this side needs to come over. And you ideally want the folds to match on the underside of the zipper. And this is where glue is handy, because you can kind of just tack everything in place. If need be, like here, I'm not happy with that, so I'm going to lift it up. If I can get it off and pull it over a bit more to help flatten it out. And try and get those raw edges meeting underneath as tidily as possible. That feels pretty good, and I'm just going to feel down here. So my sides feel fairly even until we get down to the thicker end. So I'm actually just going to pull these out a bit, which means on this side the ends may come out a little bit, but there is a bit more bulk down there with the fabric and everything, so that should be okay. I'm just going to tack those down. And I'm going to eyeball it. So looking at where my zipper is coming out of the tab, I can see that this little gap on this side and this little gap on this side are fairly equal. I'm not going to be too particular about 0.5 of a millimeter, but they are pretty good. I'm actually quite happy with that. So I'm going to squeeze and really stick the fabric to the zipper. Yep, double checking I'm all happy with that on the back too. So once that is set, I'm just going to give that a quick little press to set that glue before we fold and finish off the flap of the zipper tab. So just going to apply a little bit of heat just to the underside, and I might just put, I don't think I need any on the top because I can feel the heat came through, so that's really good. So from here all that's left to do, we're just going to put a bit of glue on the remaining length of the tab, especially in where those folds come in, and then we're just going to fold it over, match up all folded edges down the sides and the short folded edges across the bottom, and once you're happy with the alignment of it all, give it a nice squeeze to stick it all together, and then give it a little bit of heat to just help set the glue so it is held in place while we go and stitch it at the machine. Just like that. So that is looking really good. I'm really happy with how that's sitting. So once you're happy with how things are sitting and you've got enough glue to hold it all in place without being obviously one big glue mess, Pause the video, come with me, we're going to head to the machine and we're going to stitch this zipper tab in place to finish off our classic carryall. So to stitch your zipper tab in place, you're going to need again your walking foot on your machine, your needle set to the needle down position, and we're going to use a nice top stitching length of about 3 to 3.5 millimeters. I like to stitch it with my needle all the way to the left so that there's only a little bit of foot on my fabric, and I can then also use a hump jumper, or in my case my height compensation tool, which is the same thing, to put on the other side of the foot to help level it out, and it just makes it easier for the foot to then walk around the tab and stitch it in place nice and easily. So we're going to start in the top left back corner there, and we're going to stitch with a 1/8 of an inch allowance, and again, just like when we top stitched the main seam on the top of the bag, we're only going to make one stitch forwards and backwards to reinforce the threads, but we will knot them and tuck them down into the zipper tab to tidy them up at the end. So just lining up your tab with your 1/8 allowance on your foot, we're just going to make one stitch forwards and backwards to start off, and you may find you need to actually use the tails of your thread to help pull the tab through for this first bit, just to get up and over the teeth. So we're just going to stitch nice and slowly, maintaining that 1/8 allowance over the end of the zipper and into that other back corner. And what I'm going to do is actually lift up and check to see where my needle stopped, and it looks like it's at 1/8, so that's really good. So I'm going to turn, so you need to squish your bag up. I'm going to turn and we're going to come down that first side. So I'm actually going to come a little bit further across the top actually. So I'm going to hand wind and just come half a stitch, that should be enough. So to come down this first side, I'm going to put my height compensation tool under the side of the foot that essentially is floating in midair at the moment. Probably going to need 2 rows there, and that just helps level out the foot, and funnily enough helps the zipper tab feed through nice and easily. So again, maintaining that 1/8 allowance, we're just going to stitch nice and steadily down that first side of the bag. So I'm just going to lift the bag up as well, and I'm just going to creep our way down, keeping everything in line. Adjust your height compensation tool if need be. And again, we're going to stitch right into that corner, making sure we've got through both layers. Yep, that looks pretty good from what I can see underneath. So we're going to turn, and this time we're actually going to turn the bag back to where we started, and we're going to reverse over. That is much easier, I found, than trying to squish your whole of your bag into this little space here. So locking reverse on, we're going to reverse back over the end of the zipper tape as straight as possible until we get to that far corner. Take reverse off, turn your bag away from you and put your foot down. I'm going to get my tool and we're going to stitch up that remaining side of the zipper tab, adjusting things as necessary. Okay, I'm going a bit wobbly. There we go. And when you get back to the start, just make a stitch forward and backwards to somewhat lock in your stitches, and then you can take your tab out of the machine. And that looks pretty good. It is a very fiddly thing to stitch in place, and even myself, I find sometimes I need to unpick and stitch it a second or sometimes even a third time to get it nice and tidy, because I'm quite particular. If need be, you could always hand stitch it closed, or there are handbag supply or bag hardware suppliers, I should say, that do sell little zipper tab metal ends that you can slot on instead. So if you really struggle with this part, there are alternatives. However, if you're happy with your stitching like I am, from here, just dive your threads through to the wrong side, make a little knot, tuck them in and snip them off, and I'll see you back at your workstation to finish off. So now that our zipper tab is installed, our Classic Carryall essentially is finished. All that's left to do, if you used some nice little hand stitches like I did, is just use your seam ripper to take those out. and essentially let the zipper sit back where it's going to sit. So just pulling those out, they should come out fairly easily, just like that. And from here you can give your bag a good press to reshape if you found that some of your fabrics have crinkled a bit or it needs that little bit of extra love. And once you've done that, all that's left to do is attach your handles. So simply placing one handle on each side of the bag, snap those swivel hooks into place, flip it over, repeat for the other side. 1, 2, and your classic carryall is complete. Hopefully yours is looking as awesome as this one is. I'm sure it is, and you're all done. Great job! And that's all there is to it. You now have an awesome classic carryall, complete with lots of little features, but on the quiet, they were really easy to create. I hope you've enjoyed this video class, and I hope you've enjoyed sewing along with me. As always, and as I said at the start, if you have any questions whatsoever, please do not hesitate to contact me via my website or ask in our patterns group on Facebook. There's always lots of members in there willing to help out. And apart from that, that's all from me for today. So until next time, happy sewing!